Can you run us through some of the revelations that you had? Why it wasn't that simple? You talked about the consultants pre-construction. Maybe starting with that, who are we talking about, and what are some of the costs before you start turning clods over?
Yeah, well, you've got costs for an architect. If you don't want to pay for an architect, you pay for a draftsman. If you don't want to pay for a draftsman, you try and design them yourself and go to council and say, "Hey, Mr. Councillors, will you please accept my designs?" You've got to pay for, if you've got a bigger site, you need to pay for a town planning consultant who's actually going to draft the application for you. Every site, if you're going to do subdivision, needs a land surveyor to tell you whether or not you can actually chop the site up. You need to pay for lawyers to draft agreements. You need to pay for an accountant to set up new structures. They're just some of the costs, or some of the pre-development costs for consultants before you actually get involved. And as you start becoming quite bigger, the cost of consultants becomes even larger. So you've got to consider engineers. Yep. Now, every application actually requires a stormwater management plan. We've got a site that we just had to get an Aboriginal heritage report.
Wow.
That cost us another $5,500. Stormwater management report costs us a lot more money. Traffic engineers is another one. So when you're building a few, you need to actually say that, well, if you're going to have all these cars in your property, how's that going to affect the traffic in the area?
Yep.
And you need these reports before you lodge to council to get your permit.
So typically, what sort of costs would we be talking about? Like, I mean, if you're doing 3 townhouses, you might not necessarily need, an Aboriginal sort of artifact survey or a traffic management plan. But if we're kicking our developing career off, are we talking, with the town planners and the consultants, we could be in the tens of thousands of dollars before beginning?
Yeah, easy. So you don't always need a so one of the people you probably don't need all the time is town planner, if it's a small site, because you can go and consult with council yourself.
Yeah.
So this is what I've got. How do you feel about it? Is there a way we can work together on this? Let me know what you want me to change. You need to pay for that draftsman, and depending on how complex the plans are, that will cost money. And the Aboriginal Heritage Report is a must, and normally the Traffic Management Report is a must. Now the Stormwater Management Report is a must. So definitely tens of thousands. And I typically tell my clients, if it's going to be a small development, allow for $40,000 to $50,000 just to get the plans approved, because even lodging with council is going to cost you money.
Yeah,
that's before we get into the whole getting ready for construction part.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So
requires money.
You certainly are coming across as the development fund police. So let's get past the consultants and let's say we budgeted for that. We're going into the construction phase. We've got, let's say, here's another annoying consultant you might have to pay for, a quantity surveyor to do an estimate. But let's say you've got a good builder that you work with, and you think that they're going to be able to get a good price, and you might chuck the plans around to a couple of other people. What are some of the things that we need to consider when we're starting that construction phase?
So starting the construction phase, where a lot of people trip up is they choose the cheapest builder. Now, with the cheapest builder, there's a few issues. That builder normally might stuff up, which means you've got to pay for a new builder to come in to fix it, or that builder might go bankrupt. And that's what we've been seeing a lot in the last few years. So these builders that have come in for a cheap price have gone belly up, and now the developer has to go and pay for a new builder. But when it comes to getting ready for that construction part, well, you need to consider a few things. Like, you need to get working drawings for the construction.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get more detailed engineering reports or engineering drawings, so that the builder knows exactly how they're going to quote up the job.
Yep.
You might have to pay for a quantity surveyor to know how much the construction might be. But even when it comes to finance, a lot of the times you need to pay an application fee. So, So finance applications, they will say that, well, if you want to use us, you need to pay for a quantity surveyor, you need to pay for legal costs, and you need to pay for the actual obtaining of the finance, which is called a line fee or an application fee.
Yeah.
So they're just some of the extra cash requirements that's going to take you before you even get your money to construct.
Mm. And you raise a really good point about the builders going bankrupt. It's something that happens a lot, and even sort of structurally, they might sort of decide to go bankrupt and then appear in a different entity, and getting your money back or getting any money back is near impossible. Plus,
Yep.
if you're getting a new builder, it's not like if one builder did 30%, then you're just paying 70% on what's left. That builder has to take on the liability of the works that the previous one has done. So the costs they're not going to add up to 100%. You're going to be way over that, right? Like that's something that people don't realize.
Yeah, that's right. So as oftentimes, if you go and buy a cheap car, that cheap car might break down and you're going to pay even more to get it fixed or brought up to scratch. And that's right. The builder has to go back and look at what's been done before and say, well, am I willing to take this on for the existing profit margin? A lot of times it's no. And that's where people, like in a development, construction costs, you can almost say you can make that quite fixed because you can lock in fixed price contract.
Yep.
Unless you hit rock, that sucks. Or if the builder goes bankrupt. And they're the only times that the construction costs actually really blow out.
Yeah. And certainly you can assess the variations yourself and make sure that that's all reasonable with some experience, obviously, and or having a brother who's a builder, you can say, get out of town, we're not paying you for this. I'm sure that comes up. So now we get to the point where we've got to sell whatever it is. Let's assume that we're doing a residential development and we've got, say, a couple of townhouses. I mean, that sort of seems pretty simple. We got it built. Let's say we want to sell pre-construction or during construction, post-construction. What are the different nuances there, and any difficulties we can run into throughout the process?
So pre-selling, people often don't want to do it because you take a hit on your profit margins. For instance, I had a site, we had 4 townhouses, we pre-sold 3. Come settlement time, which was 12 months later, we could have made, say, an extra $300,000 if we kept them and sold them at the end of the project.
Yep.
Then the next site we went on to, we're like, oh no, we'll just build 4 townhouses and we'll hold on to them and sell them at the end. Turns out the market had turned, we hadn't locked in our risk factors, and we couldn't really sell them that quickly.
Right.
So sometimes you're left holding the ball, some might say. But when it comes for doing your actual strategy, for pre-sales, you need to factor in, well, what sort of a sales agent am I going to use? Am I going to use a seller's agent or do a selling marketing campaign where someone might take, say, $30,000 per townhouse or $30,000 per property? Or am I just going to go to the local real estate agent, sell them through them, who might take 2% or 3%? So you need to factor in different things into your strategy. And normally with even pre-sales, you need to pay the agent who sells it up front. You need to pay for marketing costs. If you want to start with construction, same thing. Whereas at the end of construction, you can just go through a normal marketing campaign.
Right. Yeah.
Pay for furniture, get it in there, get your new photos done, make it look pretty, and then just run through the normal selling campaign. The only issue is that if you've got your townhouses that are coming up at the end of a project, then there's no, there's no immediate demand because there's 4. It's almost like, the fear of missing out.
There's no scarcity because we've got 4 of these.
Yeah. So there's no immediate demand. There's no immediate want for someone to go, oh, I don't need to get this one. I can just get the next one.
Yeah.
So they're the kind of things you need to think about.
I met the guy that started Contiki Tours, and he got started. Basically, he wanted to travel around Europe for free. And he put some posters up in some boarding houses or, backpackers, and he didn't really get any nibbles until he put one up that said only 2 seats left. And he wrote a book titled Only 2 Seats Left. So like that scarcity thing is really, really important. And that's part of the reason why some apartments sort of struggle from a capital growth point of view, right? Because there's so many of them that are so similar that it can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah. And similar ones might pop up around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. So you touched on an interesting point, and that is you had 2 examples where the market was doing well and then the market turned. How do you sort of factor in that sort of risk given the time frame of a development? And typically, how long would it take to build 3 townhouses, and really what can the market do in that amount of time?
Well, over the last few years, if we're recording this in May 2020, we know that in the last 3 months, the market has taken a dip because of coronavirus. In the last 18 months, it took a dip because people just didn't know what was going to happen in the property market. So the market's changed. Oh, that was because of finance. That's right, because of the Royal Commission.
Yep.
the market changes so quickly. And while you have a strategy, I guess when it comes to developing, you have to be nimble. But most importantly, you've got to be willing to build stock and be able to hold it at the end of the project in case things do go wrong.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're forced to sell, you're going to be forced to sell at a loss. So why not develop in a location that you love and develop stock that you would be willing to keep for the next 20 years?
How many sort of beginner developers, for want of a better term, would have the capacity to hold an asset if it wasn't a good time to sell? Do you think most developers, when they're starting out, they wouldn't necessarily have the cash available to hold on to something if the market tanked on them?
You'd hope so. You'd hope so, but a lot don't. And this is where you see the horror stories come up that, I lost money on my development, and a lot of people do lose money because it's stressful, it's hard, and there's so many changing gears within it that could cause you to lose money, especially because you got that time frame that you want to meet. Having the cash is so important, but a lot of the times, even now, finance, they want to see an exit strategy, or they want to make sure that you can hold them at the end of the project. The only issue is that people might encounter the refinance costs if you have to go through that. Because what's happened at the moment is it's not cheap to get finance, especially if you're a business owner or you're trying to develop. If you're a developer, getting access to residential property finance is quite cheap. Development and construction finance is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, and it seems like the appetite has never really come back post GFC, even for development finance. That was kind of like the gold rush back then, but that's quite some time ago, and it's still sort of a competitive market, right?
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder and harder, and banks' requirements are tightening up, and they're saying, well, yeah, we know you make good money, and back in the day, back in 2008, we would have given you the money. And I talk to my older clients about this all the time. They go, why won't the bank give me money? They used to. They would have done it back in the day. I just tell them I earn this much money and it's all fine. I go, yeah, I know, but banks talk to each other now. They know you've got 20 credit cards, and they know you've got 4 properties over there. But
That's
they won't
a shame.
because you've got too much debt because you can't show them that you're going to pay the debt back.
Yeah, for sure.
So